Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm your co-host, Naresh Vissa, along with Adam Schrader as usual. And today we have a guest with us. He owns and runs a website that is very, very well known. It's one of the most popular personal financial sites on the internet. It's called The Simple Dollar. It's a website dedicated to helping people through real-world personal finance challenges in a friendly, approachable manner that receives over 1 million visitors per month. So very, very popular site. He's also the author of the best-selling book, which I find to be extremely relevant in today's environment. It's called The Simple Dollar: How One Man Wiped Out His Debts and Achieved the Life of His Dreams. I think all of us either have been in a situation like this or are currently in situations like this where we may have lost our jobs, we may have a lot of debt that we haven't paid off yet, whether it's student loan debt, mortgage debt, credit card debt, but we want to achieve the life of our dreams. So I want to welcome to the show Mr. Trent Hamm. Trent, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's first start the discussion talking about your story, the book, How One Man Wiped Out His Debts and Achieved the Life of His Dreams. That's a subtitle of your book. Talk about that journey, how you ended up in so much debt, and how you went about achieving the life of your dreams.
Well, my wife and I graduated from I met my wife in college. We graduated and married shortly thereafter, and we just turned into kind of a lifestyle of overspending. We were very much the 78% of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. That was definitely us and more. We were buying a lot of things and financing them via high-interest short-term debts, credit card debts and such. And as time went on, we became very used to that lifestyle. We kept our head reasonably above water, but then we had our first child and things got very tough very quick. And it came to a point where we realized we were having difficulty paying our rent. And at that point, I guess you could say we kind of panicked. I tend to solve problems by reading. So I went to the library and I checked out every personal finance book I could find. And the one that really resonated with me was a book called Your Money or Your Life. And that one really clicked with me. And the thing it really encouraged me to do personally in terms of an immediate response was it basically suggests in the short term, your best focus if you've got immediate problems is to focus on frugality. Whereas in the long term, you're better off focusing on things like your career and improving your income. So we were obviously facing a short-term problem. So we burrowed very hard into frugality for a short time. We sold off a lot of things. We started eating from home, all those typical things. And we started getting some really good results from it. We got ourselves back onto a reasonable playing field and so on. And I decided, because a few of my friends were interested, that I would write out everything we did in this long email. So I wrote out this long email, explained everything we had done, and sent it to about 30 or 40 friends. And I got a huge amount of positive response from it. So they asked me follow-up questions and all kinds of things. And it turned into kind of a series of email newsletters that was really informal. I was just sending them to anyone who was interested. And finally, I realized this needs to become a website. And that was The Simple Dollar. From the beginning, it's been very tied into my own experience. Like, this is something that has worked for me. This is something that hasn't worked for me. And over time, it's gradually built up a very nice readership. In 2011, I partnered with Red Venture Media because handling the back end of the site was getting beyond my means to actually handle by myself. With 1 million visitors a month, it was difficult to do things by myself. Even with a small team, it was difficult. So I partnered with them, and they took over some aspects of running the site, and we've had a great partnership ever since.
Wow. So a couple of things. First off, the book that you mentioned, that resource, it's called Your Money or Your Life. That is by Vicki Robin. And it's one of the most popular personal finance books ever written. So is that the book that you read at the library?
Exactly. That was the one that really clicked with me and helped me to change things around in my life.
And it was the year, you would say, probably around the last Great Recession financial crisis when all this happened, like 2009, 2010?
Yeah, right around then, within a year or two.
Okay. And one thing I want to mention about your blog, and we're going to talk about kind of how you've built your blog and how it's grown to become one of the most read financial sites on the internet. But one kind of, I guess you can call it a strategy or what I call a litmus test, and that is you sent out emails to your friends, and those emails had a lot of activity. People were clearly reading them, started responding. You didn't even have a formal email list or an email newsletter. You were just kind of doing it for fun. And I found personally the content that does the best, whether it's a book or a writing a blog, but the content that does the best are these informal interaction, these informal sends of emails to your friends. And that's what happened. I've written several books, and they started out also as emails to my friends or conversations with clients. And that's when I knew, okay, I need to do something more than this. I need to either create a blog or, in my case, create a book. And so I've written many books since then. And even the well-known New York Times bestselling author Tucker Max, who is one of 3 authors in human history to have 3 books at the top of the New York Times bestselling list at the same time. He writes a lot of X-rated content, or he used to, but that was also his litmus test. He would send these stories out to his buddies, and they would share them, and they would laugh about them and respond back. And that was kind of the test. It passed, and that's when he said, you know what, I should just come out with a blog. He came out with a blog and then came out with multiple books. And like I said, 3 New York Times bestselling books at the same time. So I think that's a really good strategy for people to have. It's, if you've got an idea for a book or for a blog or for a podcast, start emailing your friends, see if they'll actually engage with it and not give you the standard, oh yeah, good idea, man, good luck. Nope, that's not going to do. See if there's actually enough value to where they engage and forward it to their friends, and good things can happen.
Yeah, I would say don't even try to sell it to them as I've written this chapter, will you read it? Just send them part of the chapter and ask them for their thoughts. That's a way better approach. Don't try to even like sell it as though they're reading something that might be a book. Just share your ideas. And if they're interesting, they will start a conversation.
So you mentioned the 2 things. There was the short-term frugality and then the longer term. Like, when did you just wait until you got out of debt before you switched to the longer term, or was it kind of a gradual fading of the 2 kind of overlapping?
I tried to do both from the start, but I was with the understanding that a lot of the things I was doing career-wise and side gig-wise and stuff weren't going to pay off really immediately. Trying to improve my career path was not going to pay this month's rent. However, it was going to do great things for me a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. So while it was really important to me to get this month's rent paid, I was looking longer term as well. I think you can't do one without the other, especially if you're in a bad financial spot at the moment. Your career choices won't fix that. I mean, they will help in the long term, but this month they won't. That's where frugality is important. I think that a lot of times many personal finance writers tend to lean on one or the other when there are 2 tools that work at different tasks. Like you don't use a sledgehammer to pound in a tiny nail. I mean,
yeah,
they're different tools for different jobs, and I think frugality is the tool for really short-term stuff, and career and other things like that are better tools for the long-term stuff.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point in that I'm not sure why people think these are 2 mutually exclusive concepts, that you have to be either frugal or you have to, pick the long-term view on things. I think you should certainly do both. And the same thing goes with a college education. I don't know why the media and there's this debate about whether college education is worth it. And it's either you go to college or you start working as an apprentice somewhere or go to trade school or get a full-time job. And I'm saying you can do both. You can go to college and have a job. Like, who said that you have to pick one or the other? And the same thing goes for frugality, which, by the way, you've written another best-selling book called 365 Ways to Live Cheap, Your Everyday Guide to Saving Money, which has a lot of good kind of hacks on how you can save, small amounts of dollars here and there, from the way you fill up your gas to how you sleep to how you wash your clothes and other tidbits.
Completely. I think a lot of things are simplified down in the world to being either A or B, when a lot of times the best solution's a little of A, a little bit of B, or somewhere in the middle or something like that. And I think that frugality versus working on your career or investing is like that. You don't need to just do A or B. A little of A, a little of B is good. Do both. There's no reason you can't.
A lot of people right now, going into this, I heard it was in a crazy percentage of people in America only had like $400 in their emergency fund, and everybody, all of those people needed the bailout money that came. What were some of the best things that you were able to implement in order to pay your rent that month that people might need as the crisis continues and unemployment stays high potentially, but even those who still have their job but need to start saving for the next time something bad happens to them? What were some of the best tips that you have for people who need to just focus on the frugality at the moment?
Well, it's kind of funny because the biggest things I suggest that actually worked for us and really made a difference were things that people were essentially forced to do by stay-at-home orders. It's like, don't go out to eat, make your own meals at home. That helped us a ton. Don't go out every evening. That helped us a ton. These are things that people are kind of forced to do right now. So what I've really been telling people to do is during these last couple months is look at that money you're not spending right now and do something really important with it. Pay off a debt. Don't just sit on it and try to use it for something fun. Don't go buy stuff online with it. This is an opportunity right now to get your financial platform a lot more stable than it was before. Obviously, this applies to people that are managing to work from home and maintain their employment, but it's a good strategy. If you're not going out because you can't go out, take that money and do something really useful for it. That way, when this all ends and wraps up and we're back to some form of normal, whatever that will be, you've got a much better financial foundation underneath you. And that's a great way to re-enter whatever comes next.
Well, talking about the shutdown, the lockdown, the virus, in your book, The Simple Dollar, you share some tips on how people can build up kind of a recession-proof bank account or build up their recession-proof skills so that they don't need to worry about their bank accounts during really any part of the economic cycle, whether it's a depression, a recession. What are those tips in your overall commentary on how people can build up these skills, build up the cash flow, build up the businesses so that they don't need to worry about recessions in the future?
I think that the biggest thing people do when times are good is they start underestimating the value of just having a flat out emergency fund in the form of cash. I was criticized a little bit during the good times of the late last decade that I would always overemphasize an emergency fund. I'd be like, have some cash sitting around, keep it in a savings account. You don't need to have everything in there, but have several months of living expenses in there. So that if things do go bad, like they are now for many business owners and different people, that you have that cash to fall back on. Everything just doesn't fall apart immediately. And I think people are really seeing that now, but the thing is, people will forget that this happened in 5 or 8 years when things feel normal and great again. They'll start drawing it back. Keep that emergency fund. What I usually tell people to do, and this is something that I've done myself for many years, I just have an automatic transfer into a savings account that's my emergency fund. Every single week, a little bit of money, $25-ish, comes out of my checking account and goes into a savings account. The savings account's literally at a different bank. I don't have my normal ATM card to access it. I can get to it if I need to. I have an ATM card for it at home, but that money just goes in there every week, and I don't even think about it. It just goes there, goes there, goes there. I don't worry about it at all unless there's an actual emergency where I need it. Someday there will come a big emergency where I really need it, and when I turn to that, I will have cash sitting there waiting for me that will take care of things. And I'm not really missing the $25 a week. It's not that big of a deal. And it doesn't have to be 25. It can be whatever you afford. But the point is, if you let that build for years and years, there's your emergency fund. If the next coronavirus happens in 7 years and you're locked at home and you've lost your business, you've got that big emergency fund that was just sitting there waiting for that day. And that's a great feeling.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how quickly people forget, 2008, 2009 happened. And then, 10 years later, it's like, oh, that'll never happen again. I don't need to save. Everything's going great. When your blog took off, when, you're up to, 1 million plus views, was there a specific moment? Was there a specific article that you found people just gravitated towards that, really kind of helped you take off?
It was very gradual. The one I really remember having a sense of this is really taking off and becoming something big was one that was where I tried to explain everything worthwhile to know about personal finance on the back of 5 business cards. And what that post was actually me attempting to write a short presentation for a library group. I didn't really know how to do it. So a friend of mine sat down and said, give me your presentation on these 5 business cards. Draw or write whatever you need to on the back of these 5 and just tell me what you need to know. And he did this while we were out at lunch one day. So I actually did it and drew it out and gave him the presentation of 5 business cards. And I was like, this is an article. This is a great article. And that was one that really took off. It got a lot of traffic, and it actually got me some speaking invites because of it. So that was the one where I really had this sense like this is taking off beyond what I thought it was going to, was that one.
Trent, can you tell us your best tips and what you're seeing as far as the work from home movement goes?
Okay, so I've worked from home for 12 years. I've almost entirely ran the Simple Dollar out of my own home, and all the writing I've done has been here from home. And what I'll say is, for me, the most successful thing for me it's the idea that there needs to be a wall of separation between my own life and working. And that doesn't mean most people get really strict with that though. Like you must get dressed for work. You got to have this specific spot for work. I don't necessarily mean that. I mean, you got to find that definition for yourself. Those are good starter points to try out. But there needs to be some division between your family life and your home life, or else, as I learned badly in about 2010, 2011, your work life will take over your home life, and then that's not a good situation to be in. There's got to be a way for you to just shut off the work and walk away from it. And for me, at least, what I found is I have a laptop that I do all my work on, and when my work is done, I put that in the corner, and there's nothing else in my life that's work-related. And without that separation, I probably would have gone crazy and given up on this.
Yeah, I found that I need a space, but not the dress. Like I work pretty much all day in like a t-shirt and gym shorts, but I don't work well outside of my office. And my kids know if I'm in my office, then they need to like knock on the door or check with me before they come in. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that it's different for all people. The idea of kind of walking around my house wearing, dress pants and a dress shirt just seemed kind of ridiculous.
If it works for you, great. Try out different things, but there needs to be some sort of separation for you. For me, it's my laptop. I have this laptop that I use that my kids know is my work laptop. If I have it open and I'm on it, no matter where I am in the house, that means Dad is working. If I'm not on that laptop, then they can do whatever. And that is my separation to that thing. And I also know for myself, when I open it, it's time to get down to work. When I close it, I'm done for the day or until later in the day or whatever I've got scheduled. But when that is open, I'm working. When it is closed, I am not. And that helps me a ton.
The Simple Dollar, the website is thesimpledollar.com. Trent, can you tell us a little bit about your publishing site? How many writers now work for you guys? Are they independent contractors, full-time? Are they spread around the country, around the world? Just give us a little gist of your business model. Is it advertising-based, and also your workforce?
So I work heavily with Red Ventures Media, which is a company in Charlotte, North Carolina. Collectively, the team that works on the Simple Dollar numbers around 10 people. By my best count, it's hard to say because there are some people that I share with other sites. I share some people with Bankrate.com that do stuff for both sites and a few other websites. I would say about 10 people all told. There are many writers on the site. They're spread all over the country. Most of the writers are not based in Charlotte. most of them are like individual freelancers that come on for one or two articles at a regular basis. And the biggest reason for that, honestly, it's a good insurance policy if something were to happen to me. Is the biggest reason we've really tried to expand to more writers is because if you have a roster of writers and you lose one, it's not the end of everything. If you only have one writer and you lose that one, then there's a real problem.
Yeah. And is Red Ventures Media, is that, did they acquire your company back in the day, or are they a partner owning an equity stake? What's your relationship with them?
I would, those terms are really cut and dried. I have a relationship where I'm basically, I think the easiest way to describe it is they acquired the site and I have a contract with them that allows me to basically be in charge of content and write to my heart's desire for as long as I want. So
Awesome.
I'm the founder. They do most of the site running. I'm the founder. I do a lot of the media for the site. I do most of the writing. That's actually the role I feel most comfortable with. So that's what we worked out.
Did you work in an office before you started working from home?
You could call it I would say an office. I worked in a research lab environment. So it was not really so much an office. It was more like an actual, imagine what you think of as a biology lab in your head, and you're probably not that far off. I did data mining for biological research.
Okay, so talk about your shift from working in that environment to working from home. How did you go about doing it, and what did you feel were the turning points for you?
Well, for me, basically, it came down to I started the Simple Dollar. When it started off, it was a hobby, and then it kind of became a side gig. And then the stuff I needed to do to really keep it going and growing was eating up more and more time. So eventually I had to make a choice. I had to say, all right, am I happy with the Simple Dollar being the size that it was at the time, which was maybe 30 or 40,000 visitors a month or something like that? Or am I going to go full time and do this all the time and work from home and do this? And basically, if it wasn't for the fact that we had gotten ourselves on a very stable financial platform, which is the material I write about, I wouldn't have made that choice to jump to the Simple Dollar because my research job was more stable. It was the frugality and the choices we had made that I wrote about on the Simple Dollar that made it possible for me to do it and make that leap. So that was a powerful thing. And then as the site kept growing, I realized that even full time by myself, I couldn't keep up with it. So I started hiring a lot of virtual assistants. That was the way that they were often described then. Just people off-site that were doing very specific narrow aspects of the site and just handling them. And I kept hiring more of them. And I found it reached a point where I was spending most of my time managing virtual assistants. And I wasn't enjoying that. So that's when I started looking like maybe I need to do something different. I don't want to just be a manager. That's not what I want to do. So I just started exploring other options, and I eventually wound up with Red Ventures.
Cool. So you brought up earlier how you sent out emails to your friends and shared your experiences and your tips with them. Now, it's not, as a publisher myself, it's not easy to just start a blog and then you get 1 million visitors overnight. What tactics, strategies did you utilize to grow your readership, to get yourself out there, get the company out there? Was it just a partnership? Well, how did you get that partnership with Red Ventures? Was it the partnership? Was it social media? How did you grow the business?
By the time I joined in with Red Ventures, my readership was getting somewhat close to what it is now. It was getting there. It wasn't as high as it is now, but it was getting there. What I really did back in the day to get the readership ball rolling was I kept asking my friends what kind of questions they had. I was like, do you have any questions about personal finance you can just send me? I kept asking that mailing list I had from the beginning is like, what do you want to know about? And I'll do my best to write about it. And at the same time, I also kept a pocket notebook with me. And every time I saw something or heard something that seemed interesting, I'd write it down. And those two things were the source of pretty much all the content on the site for the first 5 years. And all of that came, and most of it came from direct reader questions. It's like someone would ask me a question, I would answer it and send them back a link, and I'd say, hey, I was glad to write this, and if you could you share it with a couple friends if you think the answer is good? And a lot of them did. I mean, if you're directly responding to someone with a thoughtful response, and you say, all I ask of you is that you share it with a few people, they probably will. And so starting off with that email list is kind of how it built. And it got to the point where I didn't even know most of the people I was sending to or I was talking to. I didn't know them personally anymore because it had reached a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend point, and there was no way to truly trace the connection. But that's really how it started. I was very focused on trying to answer questions that people were actually having. And I found that, yeah, that's what I mean. By directly doing that as much as I could was really I think the key to it.
Yeah, we try to do the same thing on our show. We've come out with episodes completely, 30-minute episodes based on a question that a listener might ask. And we try to cover every topic imaginable when it comes to working from home, whether we think about it or maybe a guest pitches themselves. I think your publicist got in touch with us and saw that there was relevance to what you do in your background to what our show does. But then, like you said, our listeners are who are most important, and we try to answer every comment or review or question that they send us. hello@workfromhomeshow.com, hello@workfromhomeshow.com if you do have any comments or questions. And we're trying to do the same thing, but we're not up to 1 million listeners yet.
I will say this, I found this over and over again. It is far better to go through 100 questions and find one that's a really good question and give that one a great answer than to give middling answers to 100 people. You're way better off choosing that one question that's great and then giving that your best shot at a really great answer. So take that for what you will. I know there's a lot of new people that get into the habit of like, I will respond to every comment. I will respond to every question. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to do that, you're a lot better off waiting for the meaningful thing, the really meaningful, good question that has value, and then giving that your home run and then not worrying that much about the rest of the comments or the questions.
I want to go back to the personal finance for a second here. One of the huge things that's been, talked about by people in the last couple of years is the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early. And I'm very concerned with the current, I know a lot of them base their retirement on pulling out 4% from the stock market every time, every year you pull out just a little bit of there. But they hadn't really, since the FIRE movement started for like really hard charging, there hadn't been a market downturn like there is now. What are you hearing from your listeners? Do you have many FIRE readers? And if so, kind of what have you been hearing or what questions have you been hearing from them as this turbulent time has been happening?
I haven't had a lot of people that have actually fully turned the switch and gone FIRE and just been like, I'm retired now. I haven't had a whole lot of people that have done that. What I've had is a lot of people that felt like they were getting close, and then this showed them that they really weren't. And what I felt mostly is disappointment. It's not that oh no, doom is gloom, this is never going to work. They mostly feel disappointed that their goal that was 3 years from now is now looking more like it's 8 years from now. So I don't think people have necessarily given up the hope or given up the idea. I think there's just been a realization that their time frame is not what they thought it was. This is not exactly the rocket straight to the moon that they had originally believed. They'd heard stories that it was not like this, but I think they're feeling disappointment more than anything. Not frustration, not giving up, not this is apocalyptic, but disappointed.
So have you, over all the years that you've been doing this, have you felt a shift in people's attitude toward personal finance, or do you constantly see like new people and you're constantly answering the same questions?
I'm pretty consistently answering familiar questions with variations. And no one's life is the same, but I feel like there are a lot of things that are variations. I see a lot of people all the time getting themselves a little underwater in debt and then realizing they're scared. What do I do now? That happens all the time. I hear that all the time from readers. Like, they've suddenly realized that what they're doing is not working. Well, OMG, what do I do now? That is the most common question I get, and I get it over and over again, regardless of whether the economy is great or bad. I will say I felt like there were more people feeling like they were making a mint off of investing when the things were going well. And that was, I guess, when I first started the site, that was not, never heard that from anybody. It took a few years after 2008 to get people getting that sense of like, I'm invincible because of my investments. But I started feeling that more and more as the bull market went on. I think the longer they go on, the more invincible people feel. Yeah. And the more I would hear that, I get the sense, well, I'm going to be retired in 3 years. This is just a rock solid plan because it's worked for the last 8 years. No, that's not true. But I think that now I expect this is resetting the clock to at least 2008. There's going to be a long period before people think their investments are invincible again.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, since you write the personal finance blog here, what are your thoughts? Your book talks about how you wiped out your debts. What are your thoughts on people's programs like Dave Ramsey?
I think Dave Ramsey is really great for figuring out what exactly to do immediately if you have a debt pile. Mm-hmm. If you have a big pile of debt and you don't know what to do about it, his advice is really good. I think he starts to get less good when you've got all your debts paid off and you're trying to figure out how to invest for the future and plan. I think he often gives really, really unrealistic advice about investing. He talks about getting an average 12% a year annual return. And even in a bull market, that's pretty heavy. I don't think you're ever going to realistically get that year in and year out. And he talks like that's a given. So my feeling on him mostly is that his advice is great if you're struggling to make ends meet and turn things around. Once you've got things turned around, I think it's time to turn the page and look at others for investing advice.
Definitely agree.
Well, one thing about Dave Ramsey that a lot of people don't know, I think part of the reason why he goes for that 12% annual return is because he's a pretty big private equity and real estate investor, and he's invested in kind of high cash flow, lower risk type of asset classes. So yeah, he talks a lot about debt is bad. But at the same time, I know kind of personally that he is almost maxed out on his debt, at least when it comes to mortgage debt. So maybe that's why he talks about the 12% annual returns.
I wonder how this situation will feel if people are start defaulting on mortgages in large numbers soon, because I have a feeling that would affect that kind of portfolio quite badly.
Well, for real estate investing, it's a bit different. So mortgage defaults will likely happen for homeowners and not for real estate investors, largely because the commercial real estate industry is what.
So you're saying he's in more into commercial real estate? Okay, understood. That's a little bit different.
No. He's more into residential. He could be into some commercial, but at least right now, 2008, 2009 was more of a residential real estate crisis, at least not on the investing side, but on the home ownership side. So homeowners essentially were given they were approved for loans that they knew that they couldn't pay back. They didn't either have high enough income, good enough jobs, sustainable jobs, but the banks just went ahead and approved everybody. This time around, it looks like the commercial real estate industry is screwed, largely because of work from home and
a lot of services that people are realizing maybe they don't need. I think a combination of those two will be tough for commercial real estate. I agree. I will say I am a little worried. I know that I have had a fair amount of readers come to me as like, I'm on unemployment right now. What do I do? I've seen a lot of those, and they do mostly seem to be, I will say they do mostly seem to be renters from my conversations. But if there's a sufficient number of homeowners that are paying back a mortgage that are doing that, I suspect there will be some home mortgage issues as well. I mean, it really depends on how fast it turns back into people getting reemployed, which we don't know. I can't look into a crystal ball and say what we'll look like 2 years from now. I have no idea. Neither does anyone else.
Yeah, well, piggybacking off what you just said, you said most of them are renters, of people coming to you saying, I'm unemployed, what do I do? And so that means they're probably renting an apartment or a home from a landlord or a real estate, a single family or residential real estate investor. So going back to Dave Ramsey, I know that he's involved in single family real estate and that he has a lot of debt, and it's good debt in the form of mortgages on homes or multifamily, which do produce returns of 10 to 15% a year. So I think that's one thing. People who go through Dave Ramsey's program or who are just kind of familiar with him but don't know the ins and outs of it, they just clump all debt as credit card debt, like as bad. They all clump it in the same group. But in reality, he actually teaches that there are actually good forms of debt that you should have.
I don't dispute. I think a low interest home mortgage is perfectly fine for everyone. I think that the big issue is that people get debt without. It's really the short term thinking that's the issue. If you really are truly applying some long term thinking, there are good forms of debt. The issue is that many people like, I want this thing by Friday, and that's what gets you in trouble. Is you're putting your personal desires and short term wants, and if you start financing that with debt, that's where the problem comes from. And I think that's where 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and I have a number of studies that get you somewhere close to that number, all sorts of variants. That's where they get into trouble, is they start living very short term. That 78% of Americans includes a fair number of people that are making six figures.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like my wife's has a good paying job. And there are people who've been making the kind of money that we're making for years. And as soon as the slowdown started, they were like, I can't afford for, my hours to get reduced or my pay to get cut. And it's like, man, you've been making, well into the six figures for 15, 20 years. Like, what have you been doing with your money? It's kind of incredible to me that, people still do that. The lower end workers, the lower paying jobs, I understand, because it's very hard to save 3-4 months worth of salary whenever you're making $30,000. But yeah, the higher income earners who are living paycheck to paycheck, I just kind of shake my head at, and kind of, man, you need to work on yourself before the next downturn hits.
Completely agreed.
And you probably talk about this quite a bit, Trent, but I know these higher income workers, like Adam said, they have a reduction in hours and they're like, oh, what am I going to do? I can't afford this or that. Well, there's a reason why the vacation industry was very, very profitable. You want to take a family of 4 to Hawaii, that's a minimum $5,000 trip. You want to upgrade your car, you want to get that Tesla or BMW, that can range anywhere from $40,000 to $140,000. And so it's like every year, I think these, I don't fall into this category. Adam, you don't. And obviously Trent, you don't. But a lot of people, Americans and even people outside of America, every year it's like, okay, I need that next car. I need a bigger house. I need to take that vacation. I need this gadget for my kid. I need to send my kid to the $35,000 a year private school. So that's where all the money's going.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not on board with almost any of that you just described. We own two cars. We could afford a nice new car if we wanted to, but we own 2 cars, and the one with the least number of miles on it's like 140,000. I could go to the dealership tomorrow and buy a brand new car, but I can't justify that in terms of what I want out of the rest of my life. So I don't. I'm going to drive the cars we have until they don't drive anymore, and then I'll go get another late model used car. That is in line with what I want out of the rest of my life. A brand new car isn't. I don't necessarily judge people that want the brand new shiny new car if that's what they really want, but they need to realize that in doing that, they're sacrificing a lot of long-term things. That's just, you can't do both. You got to kind of decide, are you on board with your short-term wants or your long-term goals?
Yep. You got to decide what's most important to you. And if the most important thing is a new car, then you just have to budget that in.
I have a friend who I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, the most important thing to him in his entire life is having a new car very regularly. I think he would be devastated if that couldn't happen to him. And he's quite willing to delay retirement lots of long-term things by quite a bit to have that.
Yeah.
I know it's important to him. It's like, it's his thing. And that's okay. If you understand that is your thing, that's great. But if your identity is not that strongly tied up in a car and you're spending that much money on a car, is that really helping you get to where you want to be? It's something that everybody should be thinking about.
Everybody's different. I used to work for a boss who one of the most important things in his life was he needed to fly in a private jet wherever he went. That was very, very important to him. So he still does that. He's got his own jet, and whenever he wants to fly to Europe or anywhere in the country, that's what he's got a boat. He also has a private boat. So that's also very important to him. I have another friend who it's very important that he flies first class. That's just one of his things. Each person is different, but I think the key here is if you can afford that, there's nothing wrong with having a car every year like your friend or flying the private jet. But if you can't plan for a rainy day, if you can't plan for the next virus that's going to come and shut down the economy for 2 months, and if that's going to destroy your savings and your cash flow, then you probably need to be reading Trent's site, thesimpledollar.com.
I hope they do.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Trent Hamm, thanks for joining us on the Work From Home show. You're the founder and publisher of The Simple Dollar, really, really awesome personal finance website, author of The Simple Dollar, How One Man Wiped Out His Debts and Achieved the Life of His Dreams. The website is thesimpledollar.com. Trent, any final thoughts or pitches that you want to make?
Go to the website, but more importantly, this is the most important thing. Spend some time right now thinking about what you want most out of life, and then make sure that the decisions you're making every day are really in line with that.
Very cool. Trent Hamm, thanks for joining us on the Work From Home show. And to all our listeners, you heard Trent once again. Visit thesimpledollar.com. Go to Amazon, type in his name, Trent Hamm. You'll see his 2 #1 best-selling books. Check them out. And until next time, keep on working from home.